The kitchen clock ticked in the dim light of dawn, its steady rhythm filling the silence. My hands were wrapped around a mug of coffee I wasn't even drinking anymore. The steam had already faded. That's when I saw it. A thin manila folder lay on the counter, just far enough from the edge to make me think someone had set it there intentionally. Curiosity pulled me forward. I slid it open and felt my breath catch. Inside were travel documents, glossy boarding passes, crisp as if they'd been printed last night. My eyes darted to the names, my heart thudding harder with every second. Passenger 1, Megan Brooks. That was my daughter. Passenger 2, Evelyn Carter. That was me. For a moment, my brain refused to connect the dots. Less than 24 hours ago, Megan had sat at this same counter, telling me with that careful, almost patronizing smile, "Mom, you're too old for long trips. We don't want you to get worn out. Why don't you just watch the house while we're gone?" She'd said it as if she was protecting me. Tyler, her husband, hadn't even looked up from his phone when he added, "Yeah, it's better this way." Better for who? Now here I was, holding undeniable proof that my name, my seat, had been on this trip the entire time. My stomach twisted with a mix of shock, confusion, and something else I hadn't felt in years: anger. I ran my finger over the printed letters of my name, half expecting them to smudge like some cruel joke. But they stayed there, bold and unapologetic, as if mocking every word they'd said to me the night before. I thought of all the little moments that had led here. The way Megan had stopped asking if I wanted to join family outings, the way Tyler rolled his eyes when I spoke up, the way my place in their lives had shrunk from mother to house sitter. And yet this ticket. The front door creaked open. Their footsteps echoed in the hallway, Lily's soft voice asking her father where her stuffed bear was. I quickly slid the folder back into place, my mind racing. What did this mean? Was it a mistake? Had they booked my ticket and decided at the last minute to leave me behind? Or was this some twisted oversight? A leftover detail they forgot to erase. Megan walked into the kitchen, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, a faint scent of her perfume cutting through the stale morning air. "Morning, Mom," she said casually, moving toward the fridge. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady, though my heartbeat was anything but. Tyler followed, dragging a carry-on behind him. He gave me a nod, already focused on his phone again. I glanced at the folder, still sitting where I'd found it. My name was there, printed in black ink. It felt like it was glowing, daring me to acknowledge it. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Yesterday, I'd accepted their decision without question, telling myself I didn't want to be a burden. Today, I held proof that the story wasn't as simple as they made it seem. I didn't know why they'd done it, but I knew one thing for certain. This trip wasn't just theirs anymore. I looked into the camera, my eyes locked on whoever was watching. Yesterday, they told me I was staying home. This morning, I found out the trip was meant for me all along. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Before all of this, my life was simple, and I liked it that way. Most mornings started with the soft creak of the floorboards as I shuffled to the kitchen, sunlight spilling through lace curtains I'd had since Megan was a little girl. I'd make coffee the way I always had, strong with a spoonful of sugar and a splash of cream, then tend to the roses in the backyard. The air was fresh in those early hours, carrying the faint scent of dew on petals. After 30 years as a school librarian, I had settled into a rhythm that suited me. Retirement didn't mean loneliness. It meant I had time for things I loved. Volunteering at the church bake sales, knitting scarves for winter drives, and most of all, spending time with my granddaughter Lily. Lily was my sunshine. Megan would drop her off when she had late shifts or weekend plans, and those were the best days. We'd bake together, the kitchen filling with the smell of cinnamon and sugar, or curl up in the living room as I read her bedtime stories. One night, after I'd tucked her in, she whispered, "Grandma, I wish I could live here forever." I kissed her forehead. You can always come here, sweetheart. This will always be your home, too. Megan and I had what I thought was a decent relationship. She called a few times a week, usually to talk about Lily or ask for a recipe. She was busy. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a travel agency, always juggling deadlines and social events. I understood. Life was different now than when I was her age. Well, Tyler was polite, at least in front of people. He always greeted me when they visited, though our conversations rarely went beyond small talk. I tried to like him for Megan's sake. They'd been married for 7 years, and she seemed happy enough. That's what mattered to me. Holidays were my favorite. Thanksgiving was always at my house. I'd spend days preparing, filling the table with roasted turkey, creamy mashed potatoes, and my famous apple pie. I loved watching everyone laugh and talk, the house alive with voices. Those moments made all the quiet days worth it. I never thought I was in the way. I tried to be helpful without overstepping, babysitting when needed, running small errands, cooking meals to drop off if they were busy. I wanted to be the kind of mother and grandmother who made life easier, not harder. That's why when Megan mentioned she and Tyler were planning a trip to Italy, I didn't think twice about being happy for them. She told me about it while we were folding laundry together at my kitchen table. "It's just something we've been wanting to do for years," she said, smiling as she smoothed a blouse. "The food, the art, it'll be incredible." I felt a flicker of excitement for her. "That sounds wonderful, honey. You deserve it." She hesitated for a moment, then changed the subject to Lily's school project. I didn't notice anything strange at the time. Why would I? Back then, I still believed I had a permanent seat in their lives. Maybe not in every moment, but certainly in the ones that mattered. I believed that love and loyalty meant something unshakable. If someone had told me that, in just a few weeks, I'd be standing in this same kitchen questioning everything I thought I knew about my family, I would have laughed. Because back then, I thought I was safe. It happened during one of our Sunday dinners. I'd roasted chicken the way Megan liked, with lemon, garlic, and rosemary, and set the table with the good china. Lily was coloring at the end of the table, Tyler was scrolling on his phone, and Megan was chatting about work. Somewhere between passing the bread and pouring iced tea, Megan's voice shifted into that bright, animated tone she used when she was excited. "Oh, so, we finally booked the Italy trip," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Rome, Florence, Venice, the works." I smiled immediately. "That's wonderful. When do you leave?" Tyler looked up just long enough to say, "October." Then he went back to his phone. I started asking questions, the way any mother would. "Have you picked out hotels yet? Are you going to see the Colosseum? Oh, you have to try gelato from—" Megan cut in, her voice quick but polite. "It's more of a young couple's trip, Mom. Lots of walking, long flights, busy cities. We just figured it might be too much for you." Her words landed heavier than I expected. "Too much for me?" I repeated, forcing a light chuckle. "You know, all the crowds and stares," Tyler added, not looking up. "Besides, it'll be nice for you to have some quiet time here. We'll bring back pictures." I nodded slowly, stabbing a piece of chicken with my fork. "Well, that makes sense, I suppose," I said, though inside I felt a tiny, sharp pinch. It wasn't that I thought I should be invited. It was their trip, after all. But something about the way they said it made me feel old, like I was suddenly fragile, a burden they had to tiptoe around. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Grandma, you can come with us. You can walk fast, right?" Megan laughed lightly and reached over to pat Lily's hand. "Sweetie, Grandma will have more fun here. She can make her apple pies while we're away." The conversation moved on quickly after that, back to school events and Tyler's work deadlines, but I couldn't shake the way my chest felt tight, as if a door had quietly closed between us without me realizing. Later, after they'd left and the kitchen was quiet again, I stood at the sink washing dishes. The lemon and rosemary scent still hung in the air, but now it felt bittersweet. I told myself it was nothing. Just a comment. Just them trying to be considerate. Still, I remembered the way Tyler hadn't even looked at me when he said it. The way Megan's tone shifted, brisk and final, like she'd already decided my role in the story before I even had a say. I dried the last plate and stacked it in the cupboard, pushing the thought aside. Families change, I told myself. Adult children have their own lives. It's natural. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of me felt like I'd been left on the porch while everyone else went inside. I didn't know it then, but this was the first crack. The quiet, almost invisible start of something that would grow until it changed everything. After that Sunday dinner, I noticed things changing, not in a sudden dramatic way, but in small, almost invisible shifts that only someone paying close attention would catch. It started with the phone calls. Megan used to call me 2 or 3 times a week just to chat. Sometimes it was about a new recipe she'd tried, sometimes a funny story about Lily. But slowly, those calls turned into quick, functional conversations. "Hey, Mom, can you pick up Lily from school Thursday?" Or, "Do you still have my black heels? I think I left them there last month." Gone were the casual, "How was your day?" or, "Guess what happened at work?" She spoke in bullet points now. Ask, answer, hang up. Then came the skipped invitations. One Friday evening, I saw photos on Facebook of Megan and Tyler at a local wine festival. Megan had on a new floral dress, Tyler's arm around her waist. Lily was with them, grinning with a little paper cup of gelato. I stared at the screen for a long time, scrolling through picture after picture. It wasn't that I expected to be at everything, but I'd gone to that festival with them 2 years in a row. This time, I didn't even know it was happening. When I asked Megan about it the next day, she smiled like it was nothing. "Oh, Mom, it was last minute. Tyler's friend had extra tickets. He wouldn't have liked it. Lots of standing around." Standing around. It was as if she'd decided for me what I could and couldn't enjoy. At Lily's school recital, I arrived early to save them seats. When they showed up, they sat a few rows back with Tyler's friends instead. Megan waved at me from a distance, mouthing, "Hi, Mom," as though we were casual acquaintances in a grocery store aisle. Little by little, I began to feel optional, like my presence was no longer part of the picture they were painting for their lives. Once I offered to help Megan plan the Italy trip, to research hotels, maybe find a few kid-friendly stops for Lily. She shook her head. "It's okay, Mom. You'd just get overwhelmed with all the choices. I've got it handled." It was said lightly with a smile, but it landed like a door shutting in my face. I wanted to protest, to tell her I'd spent my whole life planning. Meals, school events, even the cross-country road trip we took when she was 12. But I bit my tongue. Even Tyler's politeness started to fade. He'd walk in the house without a greeting, go straight to the fridge and start talking to Megan about their plans as though I wasn't there. If I chimed in, his eyes would flick to me for half a second, then slide away. I told myself it was just the busyness of life, that I was reading too much into it. But late at night, lying in bed, I replayed moments in my head. The way Megan's voice had that edge of dismissal. The way Tyler's silence felt deliberate. The way Lily sometimes glanced at me before saying certain things, as if she knew I might not be included. It wasn't one big argument or a cruel outburst. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing away at stone. Day by day, my place in their lives grew smaller, and with each small cut, it became easier for them to pretend I wasn't part of the trip, or maybe part of much else at all. It was the first warm Saturday of spring when our neighborhood held its annual block barbecue. It was one of those events where everyone brought a dish, kids ran barefoot between the yards, and folding chairs lined the driveways. I'd baked 2 apple pies, the kind people usually lined up for, and carried them over in my favorite floral pie carrier. Megan and Tyler arrived just after me, Megan in a bright sundress, and Tyler already cracking open a beer with his friends. I spotted Lily by the bounce house and waved, my heart lifting when she waved back. It was during the first round of burgers that had happened. A small group had gathered near the grill. Megan, Tyler, a few neighbors, and me. Someone asked about their upcoming trip to Italy, and Megan launched into her plans, describing Rome's cobblestone streets and gondola rides in Venice. I smiled, listening, picturing it all. Then Mrs. Henderson from across the street turned to me. "Oh, Evelyn, are you going too?" she asked warmly. Before I could answer, Megan laughed. Not a mean laugh exactly, but loud enough for the circle to hear. "Oh, Mom, no, no," she said, brushing her hair back. "She still gets lost using her GPS. Can you imagine her trying to navigate Rome? She'd end up in Switzerland." The group chuckled. Tyler grinned, shaking his head. "She's not wrong," he added. "Remember last Thanksgiving when you ended up at the wrong grocery store?" The laughter grew. I forced a smile, willing myself not to shrink under their words. "Well, I did get there eventually," I said, my voice lighter than I felt. Megan was still smiling, but she'd already turned back to Mrs. Henderson, launching into another story about the trip. My words hung in the air, unnoticed. I stood there, my paper plate in hand, the smell of burgers and charcoal suddenly making my stomach turn. I looked at the pies I'd brought, the ones people used to praise, now sitting untouched at the end of the dessert table. It wasn't just the joke. It was the ease with which they'd told it, the comfort they had in turning me into the punchline. And the worst part was the assumption that I'd laugh along, that I'd be fine being the harmless, forgetful mother who couldn't possibly keep up. I excused myself a few minutes later, saying I had to check on something at home. No one followed me. No one asked if I was okay. Back in my kitchen, I set the pie carrier on the counter and just stood there. My hands were shaking. I told myself they didn't mean harm, that it was just a joke, that people tease family all the time. But inside, something felt different now. This wasn't just about the Italy trip anymore. This was about how they saw me, how they wanted others to see me, as someone incapable, as someone to be laughed at, not leaned on. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. It was exactly 1 week before their flight when Megan and Tyler came over to talk. I'd just finished folding laundry when I heard their car in the driveway. They walked in without knocking, as they often did. Megan was carrying a notebook, Tyler holding his ever-present travel coffee cup. "Hey, Mom," Megan said with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Of course," I replied, setting the laundry basket aside. I motioned for them to sit at the kitchen table. Megan opened her notebook, glancing at Tyler before she began. "So, we've been thinking about the trip, and we think it's best if you stay here while we're gone." I blinked, even though I already knew where this was headed. "Stay here? You mean watch the house?" "Exactly," Tyler said, nodding like he was offering me a favor. "We'll be gone for almost 2 weeks, and it'll give us peace of mind knowing you're here. Someone to bring in the mail, water the plants, keep an eye on things." Megan leaned forward, her tone soft, almost patronizing. "And Lily's school stuff is all over the place. Her winter clothes need packing away, and I know you're great at organizing. It'll be a big help." I sat there, my hands folded in my lap. They weren't asking. This wasn't an invitation to join them. It was an assignment. Part of me wanted to say, "You don't have to make up chores to justify leaving me behind." But the words never made it past my lips. Instead, I nodded slowly. "I can do that." Megan's smile widened, relieved. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd understand. And this way, you won't have to deal with long flights or jet lag." I managed a small smile. "Right. No jet lag for me." Tyler checked his watch. "We'll leave the keys and the car in case you need to run errands. Oh, and the cat's food is in the pantry." They stayed for another 15 minutes, talking about their itinerary as if I were the friendly neighbor who'd agreed to check on things while they were away. Not once did Megan ask how I felt about it. Not once did Tyler pause to see if I might want to go. When they finally left, I stood at the doorway, watching their car pull out. I felt like a piece of furniture, useful, practical, and invisible. That night, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. The light above me was the only one on in the house. Outside, the crickets sang, and the clock ticked. I thought about all the years I'd shown up for them, late nights babysitting when Tyler had work events, weekends spent making sure Lily's birthday parties went smoothly, Christmas mornings when I'd drive across town and icy roads just to be there in time for presents. And here I was, given a job, while they went off to make memories I'd only see in photographs. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier, a kind of grief that settled in the chest and refused to move. I didn't tell anyone about the conversation. There was no big scene, no slammed doors. From the outside, it looked like I'd simply agreed to help out, like a good mother should. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't sure yet what it meant, but I knew this. They thought the matter was settled, and for now, I would let them believe that. The night before their trip, the house felt unnaturally quiet. I'd already agreed to stay behind, and they dropped off a list of things to take care of while they were away: water the plants, feed the cat, collect the mail, sort through Lily's outgrown clothes. They'd even taped it to the fridge, like I might forget. Outside, the summer air was warm and still, but inside I felt cold. I moved slowly around my kitchen, the sound of my slippers against the linoleum too loud in the silence. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, watching the steam curl upward. I wrapped my hands around the mug, not for the drink but for the heat. It was the only warmth I felt that night. Upstairs, Megan and Tyler were in the guest room they sometimes used when visiting. I could hear their muffled voices, bursts of laughter, the occasional zip of a suitcase. They were packing, their excitement tangible even through the walls. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening, before retreating back to the kitchen. On the table sat the pie carrier from the barbecue a few weeks ago. I hadn't used it since. I thought of how proud I used to feel bringing desserts to community events, how people would ask for my recipes. Now, even my pies felt like part of a life that no one noticed anymore. I sipped my tea and let my eyes wander to the wall across from me. The one covered in framed photos. Megan's high school graduation, Lily's first birthday, Christmas mornings when the house was filled with laughter. In every picture, I was there, smiling, holding, supporting. Now, I was being left behind. Not because I was busy, not because I had other commitments, but because, in their eyes, I couldn't keep up. I thought of what Megan had said earlier that week. You won't have to deal with jet lag. It was meant as comfort, but it echoed now like an indictment. You can't handle it. You're not part of this anymore. I set the mug down and pressed my palms to the cool surface of the table. A wave of exhaustion rolled over me. Not from the day, but from the years of quietly absorbing small slights, of smiling through moments that cut deeper than anyone realized. It wasn't just about this trip. It was about becoming invisible in my own family. When I finally stood, the tea was cold. I walked to the back door and stepped outside. The garden was bathed in silver light from the moon, my roses standing tall in neat rows. I'd cared for them season after season, pruning, watering, protecting them from storms. They bloomed every year without fail. I wondered if anyone in my family saw me the same way anymore. Dependable, yes, but mostly in the background. Always there, but not the centerpiece. The air was still, and somewhere in the distance a train horn sounded, low and mournful. I thought about how trains kept moving, whether or not you were ready to get on. When I went back inside, the house felt heavier. I knew I'd sleep in fits, if at all. Tomorrow, they'd leave with their suitcases and their excitement. I'd stand in the doorway, wave them off, and close the door behind me. And then for the next 2 weeks, it would be just me, the quiet, and the lingering question of when exactly I stopped being part of their journey. The morning of their departure started like any other travel day. Hurried voices, the low thud of suitcases rolling across the hardwood floor, the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. I'd woken earlier than usual, not because I needed to, but because I couldn't sleep. The thought of watching them leave without me had sat heavy on my chest all night. I slipped on my robe and made my way downstairs, determined to keep myself busy until it was over. The kitchen light was already on. The counter was cluttered with last-minute travel items: a neck pillow, a guidebook, an open tube of sunscreen. But it was the manila folder that caught my attention. It sat just left of center, perfectly aligned with the edge of the counter, as if it had been placed there deliberately. I reached for it almost without thinking. The folder was thin, the paper inside still crisp. I flipped it open, expecting to see hotel reservations or printed itineraries. Instead, I froze. 2 boarding passes were tucked neatly inside. The first read, "Passenger, Megan Brooks." The second, "Passenger, Evelyn Carter." My name. Not a typo, not a +1 placeholder. My name printed in clean, sharp letters. I read it twice, 3 times, my pulse drumming in my ears. It was for the same flight, same seat class, same departure time as Megan's. I stood there gripping the folder, my mind scrambling for explanations. Had they booked this trip with me in mind and changed their minds later? Was it some mix-up from the travel agency where Megan worked? Or had I been part of the plan all along, just in a way they never intended to tell me? I pictured the conversation from last week. Megan's soft voice saying, "It's better if you stay here, Mom. You'll be more comfortable." I'd believed it, swallowed the hurt, told myself it was for the best. But this didn't fit. I glanced toward the staircase, where I could hear Megan's voice calling to Lily about packing her stuffed bear. Tyler's heavier footsteps followed, along with the squeak of luggage wheels. Carefully, I slid the folder closed and placed it exactly where I'd found it. My hands trembled slightly, but my face felt still, almost too still. Something shifted inside me in that moment. For weeks, I'd accepted my role as the quiet helper, the person left behind to keep the house running while they made their memories. But now, I held proof that things weren't as simple as they'd claimed. The questions burned, but I didn't ask them. Not yet. I didn't march upstairs demanding answers. Instead, I stepped back, leaning against the counter, letting the quiet hum of the refrigerator fill the space between my thoughts. I thought about all the times I'd let their dismissals pass without comment, the jokes at my expense, the way they'd decided my life for me. Maybe this ticket was just a clerical mistake, or maybe it was something more, something they never expected me to see. Either way, I knew one thing: they believed I was staying home. And they had no idea that I now knew otherwise. Upstairs, a suitcase zipper whined shut, followed by Megan's voice calling down, "Mom, can you make sure the cat's fed before we leave?" I opened the refrigerator door, pretending to check the milk. "Of course," I said evenly, my voice steady despite the storm forming quietly inside me. As they bustled around, I stole one last glance at the folder. My name was still there, bold and undeniable. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel at all: possibility. For weeks, I'd been moving through my days in a haze, making tea, watering the garden, listening to Megan and Tyler's plans without a word of protest. I'd accepted my place on the sidelines, convincing myself it was easier not to make waves. But that ticket changed everything. After slipping the folder back onto the counter, I went upstairs to get dressed. I pulled on a soft blue sweater and a pair of comfortable jeans, the same kind I always wore, but today it felt different. My reflection in the mirror looked the same: gray-streaked hair pulled into a bun, faint lines around my eyes. Yet behind my gaze was something sharper, more alive. I didn't have answers yet, but I had a choice. I could pretend I'd never seen that ticket, or I could see it for what it was: an opening. As I brushed my hair, I thought about the years I'd spent making sure everyone else was taken care of. I'd put my needs at the bottom of every list, and maybe that's why it had become so easy for them to assume I didn't belong in their plans. Not today. Downstairs, Megan was in the living room checking her purse while Tyler adjusted Lily's jacket. I stood in the doorway, watching for a moment. They didn't notice me. They were too busy making sure their things were ready. "Mom, did you feed the cat?" Megan asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, my voice calm but deliberate. It was strange. Just yesterday, that question might have stung. Another small reminder that I'd been reduced to a caretaker. But now, I felt a quiet confidence building. They thought they knew exactly what my day would look like once they left. They thought I'd be here, folding laundry and checking the mail while they wandered through Italian streets. They didn't know that I now had options. After breakfast, they went upstairs to get the last of their luggage. I walked over to the counter, fingers brushing against the edge of the folder. My name was still there, printed in black and white, proof that somewhere, at some point, I had been included. Maybe they had planned to cancel it later. Maybe they'd needed it for some reason I didn't yet understand. But it was still active now, and that meant the decision wasn't entirely theirs anymore. I thought about the version of me they saw, the woman too fragile for long flights, too easily lost to navigate foreign streets. But I also thought about the woman who had driven cross-country with Megan when she was 12, just the two of us and a road atlas. The woman who'd hiked the Smoky Mountains with my late husband in the middle of August heat. The woman who had built a life, piece by piece, from nothing after being widowed at 50. That woman wasn't gone. She'd just been quiet. And now she was awake. I slipped the boarding pass into my sweater pocket just to feel its weight there for a moment before tucking it neatly back into place. Not yet, I told myself. There would be a right moment for everything. By the time Megan and Tyler came back down, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my tea, smiling easily. To them, I looked exactly the same as I had yesterday. Inside, I was already somewhere else entirely. When I'd first seen the ticket, my instinct had been to demand an explanation. But the longer I thought about it, the clearer it became. If I confronted Megan and Tyler now, they'd find a way to shut me out before the plane even left the ground. No, this wasn't going to be a scene. This was going to be quiet, careful, certain. While they zipped up suitcases and double-checked their passports, I began to prepare. Not in the frantic, visible way of someone packing for a trip, but in the small, deliberate moves that go unnoticed. I went upstairs and pulled my carry-on from the closet. And it was an old Navy one, the kind with a single front pocket and worn wheels that still rolled smooth. Inside, I placed 2 changes of clothes, a small toiletry bag, my reading glasses, and the navy scarf I loved. The one with tiny embroidered flowers. From the top drawer of my dresser, I retrieved my passport. I hadn't looked at it in years, but there it was, still valid. I ran my fingers over the cover, the gold emblem catching the morning light, and felt a rush of energy I hadn't known in a long time. I kept the bag light. I could buy whatever else I needed once I got there. This wasn't about overpacking. This was about making sure nothing looked unusual. If they happened to glance at my room, they'd see everything in its place. Back in the kitchen, I made breakfast for Lily. Scrambled eggs with a little cheddar, the way she liked. Tyler sat at the table sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up when I set a plate in front of him, too. "Thanks," he muttered. "You're welcome," I replied, my tone steady, betraying nothing. After breakfast, I called my neighbor, Carol. "Would you mind popping over to check on the house later this week?" I asked. "I might be away for a bit." "Of course," she said cheerfully. "Going somewhere fun?" I smiled to myself. Something like that. I didn't explain further. Carol was the kind who'd keep a secret simply because she enjoyed having one. Then I double-checked my wallet. ID, credit card, some cash. I tucked an extra 20 in my coat pocket, a habit from years ago when I used to travel with Megan as a child. Always keep emergency money where no one thinks to look. By the time they were ready to leave, I'd slipped my carry-on bag into the trunk of the car under Tyler's larger suitcase. No one noticed. Tyler was too focused on fitting his own bags just so, and Megan was busy telling Lily to hold her stuffed bear tightly. As we drove to the airport, Megan chatted about their plans. "First night in Rome, we're going straight to the Trevi Fountain," she said to Tyler. "I read it's even more beautiful at night." I just nodded. my gaze on the horizon, where the morning sun was breaking through soft clouds. I wasn't nervous. If anything, I felt calm, like I'd been preparing for this without even realizing it. Every small act of being overlooked, every joke at my expense, every quiet moment I'd swallowed, they'd all led here. This time, I wasn't asking for permission, and they wouldn't even know it until we were already halfway across the ocean. On the surface, nothing about me had changed. I still wore my soft blue sweater. I still answered their questions in my usual calm tone. I still moved around the kitchen like I always did, making sure everyone had what they needed before we left for the airport. But inside, everything was different. We drove in near silence for the first few minutes, the hum of the tires filling the space. Megan scrolled through her phone. Tyler tapped the steering wheel to some song playing low on the radio, and Lily hummed quietly in the back seat. When we pulled into the airport drop-off lane, Tyler glanced at the clock. "We've got about an hour before boarding," he said, easing the car to a stop. "Perfect," I replied. My voice came out even, almost serene. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I could feel both of them glance at me. It wasn't suspicion exactly, more like curiosity. I got out of the car slowly, taking my time retrieving my purse from the back seat. My carry-on, the one I'd packed so carefully, was still in the trunk. Tyler popped it open, and I watched him pause for a split second when he saw it there. He looked at me. "You packing something?" "Just a few things I might need," I said simply, closing my fingers around the handle. I didn't offer more, and he didn't press, though I could see his brow crease slightly before he turned to grab their larger suitcases. Inside the terminal, Megan walked ahead with Lily, heading toward the check-in counters. Normally, I would have trailed behind, waiting for instructions or moving out of their way. Not this time. I matched their pace, my bag rolling smoothly at my side. At the counter, the airline agent smiled. "Tickets and passports, please." Megan slid hers forward first, then Tyler. I waited until their exchange was done before placing mine on the counter, the boarding pass I'd retrieved from the folder, and my still valid passport. The agent scanned them without a second thought. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Megan's head snap toward me. "Mom, what?" she began, but the agent's voice cut in cheerfully. "Evelyn Carter, you're all checked in. Gate B12. Boarding in 45 minutes. I smiled politely at the agent. "Thank you." Tyler's expression was harder to read, a flicker of confusion, maybe even unease, but neither of them said anything right then. We stepped away from the counter, and Megan tried to recover her composure, talking quickly about seat assignments to Tyler, as if ignoring me would somehow undo what just happened. I didn't push. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. We went through security, and I kept my movements steady, deliberate, unbothered. I knew they were watching me now, not openly, but in those sidelong glances people give when they're trying to figure out a puzzle without asking outright. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one feeling small. As we approached the boarding area, I sat in a chair across from them and opened a paperback from my bag. I read quietly, fully aware that they were whispering to each other a few feet away. I didn't try to hear. I didn't care. The truth was, the power had already shifted. I wasn't reacting to their choices anymore. I was making my own. And the best part? They still didn't know exactly how much control they'd lost. We were standing in the boarding area when Megan finally broke. She'd been whispering to Tyler for the past 10 minutes, her eyes darting toward me between hurried words. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through an activity book, blissfully unaware of the tension humming in the air. "Mom," Megan said finally, walking over to where I sat with my paperback. "Can we talk for a second?" I closed the book slowly, marking my page with one finger. "Of course." She leaned down so her voice stayed low. "Why do you have a boarding pass?" "Because," I said evenly, "I have a ticket. In my name." Megan glanced toward Tyler, who was watching us from a few feet away. That wasn't, it's not like," she exhaled sharply. "You're not supposed to come." "Is that so?" I tilted my head, keeping my tone calm. Because the airline thinks otherwise, and I'm not in the habit of wasting tickets purchased with my name on them. Her lips parted like she was about to argue, but no words came out. She looked back at Tyler for help. He strode over, his voice lower, but his jaw tight. Evelyn, this trip is, well, we planned it a certain way. It's just not really set up for me? I finished for him. Tyler hesitated. It's just not ideal. I smiled faintly. You're right. It's not ideal. You should probably be more careful when you use my frequent flyer miles to book your trips. The airline sent me the confirmation, with my ticket, my seat. Megan's face went pale. I didn't let her finish. I'm not here to take anything from you. You can still enjoy your trip exactly as you planned, but I will be enjoying mine too. We just happen to be on the same flight. The boarding announcement crackled over the intercom, calling first-class passengers to the gate. I stood, pulling the handle of my carry-on with one hand, tucking my book into my purse with the other. Are you in first class? Tyler asked, frowning. Yes, I said simply, stepping toward the gate. Turns out when you book with my miles, you book my seat. I'll see you on the other side of the Atlantic. I didn't wait for their reaction. I handed my pass to the gate agent, who scanned it with a smile and waved me through. As I walked down the jet bridge, the rush of cool air from the plane ahead felt like a quiet victory. I didn't gloat. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to prove in that moment. The truth had been spoken clearly and without apology. When I reached my seat, a wide, comfortable leather chair near the front, I stowed my bag in the overhead compartment and sat down. The flight attendant offered me a glass of sparkling water, and I accepted it with a small nod. Outside the window, I could see them boarding with the rest of economy, their faces unreadable from this distance. For the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own life again. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's grandmother, but as Evelyn Carter, a woman who knew her own worth. And they'd just been reminded of it, whether they liked it or not. The plane was somewhere over the Atlantic when the twist revealed itself. I'd settled into my first-class seat, sipping warm tea and flipping through the in-flight entertainment options. The blanket was soft, the seat wide enough to stretch my legs, and for the first time in years, I felt no rush to explain myself to anyone. Halfway through the flight, I got up to stretch my legs. As I passed through the curtain separating first class from the rest of the cabin, I caught sight of Megan craning her neck from a cramped row near the back. Tyler was in the aisle seat, his knees brushing the tray table, his expression sour. Lily, bless her, waved when she saw me. I smiled and waved back before continuing toward the rear galley. That's when I overheard the flight attendant speaking to another passenger. Yes, unfortunately, the airline system changed the seating after the points transfer. Those first-class seats defaulted to the original account holder. We can't override it mid-flight. I paused just long enough for the pieces to fall into place. The points transfer, my frequent flyer miles. That explained the ticket in my name. They'd tried to use my account without telling me, thinking they could either cancel my ticket later or switch it to someone else. But the system had other plans. When I returned to my seat, I tucked the blanket around me and let the satisfaction sink in. They hadn't just failed to keep me off the trip. Their own attempt to use what was mine had put me here, in comfort, while they endured the long, cramped hall in the back. Hours later, when we landed in Rome, the poetic justice deepened. The flight attendants announced that our checked luggage would be delayed by several hours due to a routing issue. I didn't have to worry. My small carry-on was right above me. I strolled off the plane and through customs, feeling the warm Italian air on my face. In the arrivals hall, I paused to exchange a bit of cash for euros, then walked toward the taxi line. That's when I saw them emerging from baggage claim, looking rumpled and irritable, still in the same travel clothes from the night before. Tyler spotted me first. "Where are you going?" he asked, almost demanding. "To my hotel," I said simply. I booked one near the Spanish Steps. Megan frowned. Wait, you're not staying with us? I met her gaze, calm and unwavering. No, this is my trip too, and I have my own plans. They didn't know I'd use some of my remaining miles to secure a boutique hotel room with a balcony overlooking a cobblestone piazza. They didn't know I had tours lined up, some of the very ones Megan had been excited about, all booked under my own name. I hailed the next taxi, the driver lifting my bag into the trunk. Before I got in, I looked at Lily, who was holding her little stuffed bear. Enjoy Rome, sweetheart. Eat lots of gelato for me. She grinned and nodded. As the taxi pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Megan and Tyler standing there, still waiting for their delayed luggage, watching me disappear into the city. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even about winning. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I'd been giving away for far too long. The part that could decide where to go, how to live, and who to share it with. And the best part? Their plan had built the runway for me. All I had to do was take off. By my third day in Rome, I had fallen into a rhythm. Mornings began with a cappuccino at the cafe around the corner from my hotel, where the barista, Marco, already knew my order. I'd spend hours wandering the cobblestone streets, ducking into small churches, sampling pastries from bakeries I stumbled across, and sitting quietly in sunlit piazzas just to watch the world pass by. I didn't check my phone much. I'd decided early on that this trip was mine, not something to narrate for someone else's benefit. It was late afternoon when I first saw Megan's message. I'd just returned from a guided tour of the Vatican museums, my feet pleasantly tired, my mind still spinning from the sheer beauty of the Sistine Chapel. My phone buzzed as I unlocked the door to my hotel room. Megan, Mom, can we talk when you get back? I stared at the screen for a moment, not sure what I felt. A month ago, that message would have set off a storm inside me. Questions, hopes, the urge to respond instantly. Now, I just set the phone down on the little desk by the balcony and stepped outside. The air was warm, the sounds of evening, clinking glasses, the hum of conversation, the distant notes of an accordion rising from the street below. I leaned on the railing, looking out at the pink-tinged sky over the rooftops. A second message came through. Megan, I think I misunderstood some things. I want to explain. I let the words settle. I wasn't angry with her anymore, and I didn't need her approval the way I once did. This wasn't about whether she understood me now. It was about the fact that I had stopped asking to be understood in the first place. Still, I did care about my daughter. I always would, but caring didn't have to mean bending myself back into the shape she preferred. I picked up the phone and typed slowly. Me. We can talk when I'm home. I'm enjoying my trip right now. A few dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, her reply came. Megan, okay, have fun. It was short, but there was something different in her tone, at least in the way I read it. Less command, more acceptance. That night, I walked to a small trattoria I'd noticed earlier in the week. I ordered fresh pasta with truffle sauce and a glass of red wine. At the next table, a young couple was laughing over a shared dessert, and for a fleeting moment, I remembered trips I'd taken with Megan when she was young, how excited she'd been to see something new, how she'd once clung to my arm in crowded places. I wondered if she missed me now, not as a house sitter or babysitter, but as her mother. The difference was, I didn't need to know the answer to keep enjoying myself. When I returned to the hotel later, I looked at my phone again. No new messages. I smiled. Not because I wanted her to chase me, but because I had finally reached a point where silence didn't feel like rejection. It just felt like space. When I stepped off the plane back home, the air felt heavier than Rome's warm breeze, but not unwelcome. I moved through the familiar terminal with my carry-on trailing behind me, the hum of airport announcements echoing overhead. Carol, my neighbor, was waiting at the curb. She waved as I approached, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "Welcome home," she said, taking the handle of my bag. "You look different. Good different." I smiled. It was a wonderful trip. We drove through quiet streets lined with late summer leaves, the kind that are just starting to hint at fall. Carol chatted about the neighborhood, who had trimmed their hedges too much, who had adopted a new rescue dog. But I let most of it wash over me, my mind still lingering on narrow Roman alleys and the sound of fountains in the evening. When we reached my house, I paused at the front gate. The roses were in bloom, deep red and full, their petals curling outward in perfect, unapologetic abundance. I set my bag down on the walkway and stepped closer, touching one bloom gently. The last time I'd stood here, I'd felt small, overlooked. Now, I felt something entirely different. Rooted. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. The scent of lavender from the sachet in my hallway closet was faint but familiar. My home was quiet, but it wasn't lonely anymore. On the kitchen table, the note I'd left for myself before leaving was still there. A simple reminder: feed the cat, water the roses. I laughed softly. I'd done both before I left, but somehow it felt like a different person had written that note. A woman whose days were arranged around other people's plans. I unpacked slowly, placing my new leather-bound journal on the nightstand. Inside were pages of thoughts I'd written in cafes, parks, and quiet hotel rooms. Not for anyone else to read, just for me. Little reminders of who I was when no one was telling me what I could or couldn't do. In the kitchen, I brewed a pot of tea, letting the steam rise and curl in the afternoon light. I carried the mug out to the garden and sat on the wooden bench beneath the climbing roses. The air smelled faintly of earth and blooms, a scent that grounded me in the moment. I thought about Megan's messages. We'd talk, in time. I knew that. But this conversation would be different from the ones we'd had before. I wouldn't be sitting there hoping for her approval, measuring my words to keep the peace. I would speak as I had in the airport, calmly, clearly, without apologizing for existing. A butterfly landed on the edge of one of the roses, its wings folding and unfolding in slow, delicate movements. I watched it for a long moment before it lifted away, disappearing into the trees at the edge of the yard. I took a sip of my tea and let the quiet settle around me. It wasn't the kind of quiet that came from being left out anymore. It was the quiet of contentment, of knowing I could choose my place in the world rather than waiting to be offered one. For so long, I thought my life was something that happened around other people's needs. But standing in that airport with my ticket in hand had changed me. Not because of the trip itself, but because it reminded me that my life was still my own, and that I didn't need permission to live it. The sun dipped lower, casting golden light over the garden. I sat there until the shadows grew long, my tea cooling beside me, feeling as full and alive as the roses in bloom.